So today we're going to be working on a 10% summary. And hopefully this is not the first time that you are seeing this, but I'm hoping that you can gain a new perspective and understand how to write a thorough and concise 10% summary. So first, what is a 10% summary? A 10% summary is very much what it is, exactly as you hear it. It is 10% summary of the text that you're reading. For our text, we voted, and the majority of you favored the September 11th attacks. So that is the article that we are going to write a 10% summary on. And that is going to be approximately about 100 plus words. We're gonna go a little bit over just to make sure that we're not missing out on some details. So the first thing that I like to do is, when I'm looking at the organizer for the 10% summary sheet, is I'm actually gonna skip step 1 and go right down to step 2, because this is technically what's gonna be the first part. And so as I'm looking at step 2, this is going to ask for my start sentence. So what is it? Where am I getting this information from? Who wrote this information that I'm writing about? Who's the author? And what is it that they're doing in the article? So this is going to be your topic and central idea, or your main idea. So this is going to be the main idea, and then you have these central ideas that are going to support that main idea. And so looking at this, let's actually start and look. Let's go back to our article. So we have September 11th attacks, and that is the title. So that is what is going to go here. If you look carefully, source, or actually, sorry, I made a mistake there. This is where this is coming from. So we know that this came from Freckle. We don't have much more information other than that. Even when I scroll to the bottom, there's no additional information. It just has the captions under the pictures. So yeah, we're going to stick to Freckle as the source. So in Freckle, and again, read carefully this information. So here it says if typed, we're going to italicize that. So let's go ahead and do that, and hopefully I get that option. Oh, not with this text. Let's see if I change it. Yep, I change it. It does allow me to italicize it. So I just have to change the font here. So in Freckle, article, so the title of the article goes here in quotes. You're going to capitalize all big words over 5 letters long, and all nouns and verbs. So this is our title, September 11th attacks. So I'm going to type it exactly as I see it here, in quotes. And put that there, and this does not get italicized, so I'm going to go ahead and change that and highlight that. There we go. Let's go back and see, do we have an author identified? And we do not have an author identified. So so here's what it says. Author. In general, you can just use the last name of the author. If there's more than one, we're going to list all of them. If no author is named, we're going to write the author. So that's what we're going to do. So again, going back, in Freckle, article September 11th attacks, the author, okay, so we're going to pick a verb here that makes sense. For example, argue, explain, propose, discuss, any verb describing the purpose of the reading. And so we're going to say in Freckle, article September 11th attacks, the author explains. Because that is what they are doing. They are explaining what happened. Okay, now for the rest of it, topic. This is our topic. In a few words, describe what the article is about. If possible, do not include exact words from the title in the description of the topic. So for ours, it's a little hard because the title is September 11th attacks, and that is what happened. So we will be using some parts of that, but it is to explain what happened, and that is what happened. So this is a little bit, we're going to break the rules a little bit here. The terrorist attacks, and I'm actually trying to think of how I want to reword this part. So in Freckle, article September 11th attacks, the author explains the impact the terrorist attacks had on the U.S. in 2001. Let me see how that sounds. This is part of the writing process, guys. You know, you have to kind of go back and think and reword things. So in Freckle, article September 11th attacks, the author explains the impact the terrorist attacks had on the United States in 2001. All right, now let's work on this. So now that we know our topic, which is the impact the terrorist attacks had on the United States back in 2001, now we can kind of go in and identify the central ideas. Generally, there will be 2 to 4, but I'm going to explain something that's, again, very unique to this article. We're looking at the article, and this is why text features was so important for us. We have our title or heading, and then we have our subheadings throughout the text. So one of the neat things with subheadings is that they tell you pretty much what it is that our central ideas will be. And so looking at this, okay, the first part is about the terrorists. The second part is a timeline of the attacks. The third is heroes and rescuers. And the fourth is the immediate aftermath. And then we happen to have a fifth, which is the impacts over the next 15 years. So we're actually going to take each part and give a brief sentence about each section, which is hard to do. You know, you have all of these sentences, paragraphs in some cases. This one has 3. And this one has 3. So there are many, many paragraphs here. And we have to kind of figure out how we're going to put this in one sentence and get to the point. Because you don't want to give too much, but you want to give enough that it's a good summary. So for our first one, we're going to put about the terrorists, or simply terrorists. We're just going to keep it, again, very simple. Our second one is going to be about timeline. Our third is on heroes and rescuers. Our fourth is on let's just put aftermath. And let's actually go ahead and put in aftermath and impact. So we're going to combine the last 2 together because we don't have room for another line, so I'm just going to do it that way. All right, so aftermath and the impact over the next 15 years. All right, so now let's go back to terrorists and let's look back at that paragraph so we can kind of figure out why would we summarize it this way. So if we're looking back at the paragraph, it says, you know, they used fear. There were 19 terrorists. They were all militants in connection to Al-Qaeda, which happens to be an extremist group. It was founded by bin Laden in the 80s. He planned the attacks because he felt that the U.S. was unjust towards Muslims. In his words, terrorism against America deserves to be praised. And then here's some information about Muslims and the religion. and where it is practiced, and the extremists, bin Laden, his motives, and support of Israel, etc. So I think really if we focus on this paragraph, this is the more important part. These details are, they're good, but they're not super important to understand what this is about with regards to the terrorists. So going back, we have some key details. There were 19 terrorists who committed this attack. That's pretty important. They were militants affiliated with Al-Qaeda, and they were all connected to this group that Osama bin Laden was a founder of. And then I think it's important to identify why he felt that he should attack. And that is because he felt that the U.S. treated Muslims poorly or unjust. And again, we're going to kind of summarize this and write this in our own words. So I would say unfairly. That's really, when we summarize this is really what it's about. So let's go back to our text and our sentence, and let's write that in a pretty good and concise way. We're about to write a number because I'm going to start with 19. And when we're talking about numbers, generally any number over 10, we would be able to get away with just putting down the digits. So I would technically normally put like this, 19. But we don't start a sentence with a number. So just like you see up here, 10% summary. Generally, it would be the number 10, but we don't do that at this point when we're writing. It's the first number. So we're going to write it out. So we've got, again, 19 terrorist militants. Let's go back to that. Terrorist militants connected to or affiliated. This is a good vocabulary word to learn. Hopefully you've heard it before, but if not, it's pretty much connected to. So 19 terrorist militants affiliated with Al-Qaeda. Let me expand this. And I'm sorry if you hear these random noises. It's my dog in the background. So 19 terrorist militants affiliated with Al-Qaeda attacked the United States. And it looks like I'm at my limit here. Al-Qaeda founders. And I'm going to put between commas because this is referring... Oops. Oh gosh. This section here is referring to Osama bin Laden. So 19 terrorist militants affiliated with Al-Qaeda attacked the United States because according to Osama bin Laden, and you're probably wondering, who's Osama bin Laden? One of the Al-Qaeda founders. And so because this is referring to him, we're going to put a comma before and a comma after. The sentence could do without this, and we could technically take this out and the sentence would still be a sentence. But we're putting that there just to clarify for the reader. Who in the world is Osama bin Laden? Oh, he's one of the Al-Qaeda founders. That's who he is. So one of the Al-Qaeda founders. So according to him, the U.S. Alright, so that is our first central idea sentence. And hopefully you can see this. This is kind of funky here. So let me read that again. 19 terrorist militants affiliated with Al-Qaeda attacked the United States because according to Osama bin Laden, one of the Al-Qaeda founders, the U.S. treated Muslims unfairly. That's our first central sentence after our topic sentence. All right, so now timeline of attacks. So we've got some pretty thorough information about when this all happened, the times, all of this information. So this is a lot, and we don't need to know all of this. This is something that the reader can read as they read the regular text. But to summarize, we know that there were a total of how many planes? What happened to those planes? How did they end up on these buildings? Oh, they were hijacked. Okay. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the brief, main point. So 4 planes were hijacked and crashed into 4 locations, but 3 general destinations. The first being the World Trade Center in New York City. So we had the North and the South Tower. So the first one was the North Tower. At 45, the plane crashed into the North Tower, and then 18 minutes later, the South Tower. So the first destination was the World Trade Center in New York City. The second was the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. And the third, we're not really sure, but it is assumed to be thought that it was going for the White House or the U.S. Capitol. But it ended up in Western Pennsylvania. So let's just keep it brief and let's talk about that. So now let me explain how I would do that. I'm going to go ahead and show you. So let's do another text. 4 planes were hijacked. So a few things that I want to explain here. So 4 planes were hijacked and crashed into the World Trade Center in New York City, the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., and a field in Western Pennsylvania. So let's talk again really quickly about this. So 4 planes, World Trade Center. Notice how I capitalize World, W, Trade, T, and C in center. That is a proper noun. It is a place in New York City. And so I need to capitalize right here. Those need to be capitalized. The Pentagon. The is never capitalized, but Pentagon is because it is a place in Washington, D.C. And Washington, D.C., notice the capitalization there. And then a field is not a place. Western is not a place. These are it's just a random field in Western Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is a proper noun, so Pennsylvania will get that capitalization. All right, so hopefully that makes sense for you. Moving on to heroes and rescuers. So again, I'm going to keep it brief. We know that close to 3,000 people died. We had a lot of people that risked their lives for others and helped evacuate and so on. So that's what I'm going to say here. And again, I'm going to keep it brief. All right, so many people risked their lives to help. Many people risked their lives to help evacuate buildings and save trapped workers. So looking at the immediate aftermath, we know that, again, 3,000 people died in the World Trade Center attacks. September 11th attacks, forced U.S. to shut down. We had a lot of people that were stranded in foreign countries. President Bush addressed the country and would go after all of them. He didn't care if they were the actual terrorists or the people that protected. He was going after everybody. And then there were relief funds that were arranged to help families. Despite all of that, as we read here, Muslims were still being attacked by people in the United States. So even after President Bush addressing and asking for them to be respected, it's just the unfortunate realities of our world. And I think we're experiencing something very similar today with the pandemic. And this is primarily going to be focused on the aftermath, and then I'll explain the last part with the impact. So let's actually use the aftermath in our sentence. The aftermath which is about what happened over the next 15 years. If you look again at this paragraph, you'll see that the terrorist attacks September 11th transformed the U.S. government and relations abroad. President Bush announced a war on terror. Navy SEALs finally killed Osama bin Laden 10 years later during the Obama administration, and the United States finally stopped and ceased its combat operations in 2014. So that was only 6 years ago that we put an end to this war. Let's summarize that. And even after don't know if you captured that, but even after finally they killed Osama bin Laden 10 years after the war, it still took an additional 3 years before we stopped all operations and ended the war entirely. In October of 2001, president that would remain active for the next 13 years. Notice that 13, it's not spelled out because it's in the middle of the sentence. So again, the aftermath of the attacks was profound, or great, or big, or impactful. That's what profound means. Was profound as it didn't only result in almost 3,000 deaths, but also thousands of passengers. Let's reword that. But also redirected thousands of passengers' flights who ended up stranded in foreign countries. The aftermath of the attacks was profound, as it didn't only result in almost 3,000 deaths, but also redirected thousands of passengers' flights who ended up stranded in foreign countries. I think I can accept that. In October of 2001, President Bush declared a war on terror, one that would remain active for the next 13 years. Alright, so there you have it, guys. That's the 10% summary. And that's my process of thinking. Hopefully you were able to gather some good ideas and understand how to work through a 10% summary when you're summarizing for your classes. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Make sure that you write this out on your organizer and submit.